Hi, I'm Bill, the Domestic Monk. Welcome back to another video, and thanks very much for watching. So a couple of days ago, we were all treated to a national display of the inevitable ending point of this corrupt ideology called Protestantism. On the day following Donald Trump's triumphant return to Washington, after being overwhelmingly elected in a landslide, the President, Vice President J.D. Vance, and their families attended a prayer service where they were berated by a militant feminist pretending to be an Episcopalian bishop. Female priests are yet another in a long line of Protestant innovations with absolutely no prior precedent in the church. Women cannot be priests. This issue first reared its ugly head in the Anglican Communion. It's a modernist movement being pushed on the church by the corrupt ideology of militant feminism. So what is the Anglican Communion? For a concise history, I will defer to this YouTube post by Catholic social commentator Michael Knowles, who himself had the misfortune of being present for this unholy service by this so-called bishop. Anglican was created to copy Catholic theology, with a new ecclesiology that replaced the Pope with the King of England. Episcopalianism was created to copy Anglican ecclesiology in a nation that had broken politically with England. It's not surprising that things got screwy. Protestantism was born of division, and division begets division. Whenever someone in Protestantism comes up with a new innovation they want to impose upon the church, they just go out and form their own sect. Those who agree with them join, and they declare themselves to be right. It is a corrupt ideology that subordinates the teaching of Christ in His holy church to their will, while at the same time proclaiming to follow Him. So back to the Anglican Communion and the beginning of this false teaching. There is a church office in England called the Archbishop of Canterbury. It was the head of the Catholic Church in England for centuries, and it was held by men like St. Thomas Becket, who was martyred for not selling out to King Henry II when he wanted to usurp the authority of the Pope. The last Archbishop of Canterbury before Henry VIII split from the church was William Warren, and he held the office from 1503 to 1532. Although Warren ultimately accepted the act which made Henry head of the church in England, he made it pretty clear that he would not sanction the acts of Parliament that usurped the power of the church. He died in 1532 at 82 years of age, but likely would have been tried and executed for treason if he hadn't. Henry VIII appointed the infamous Thomas Cranmer the first Protestant archbishop following Warren's death. Cranmer was excommunicated by the Pope for being a heretic after Mary I restored Catholicism to England, and he was burned at the stake. There was one other legitimate Catholic Archbishop of Canterbury named Reginald Cardinal Pole. Pole, who initially worked for Henry VIII, was once offered the office of Archbishop of York if he would support Henry VIII's desire to have his marriage to Catherine of Aragon annulled so that he could marry Anne Boleyn. Pole was not even ordained to the priesthood at that point in time, and he declined. After St. Thomas More and Bishop John Fisher, the last faithful Catholic bishop in England, were martyred by Henry VIII, Pole finally vocalized his opposition to Henry VIII's divorce. He was forced into exile where he watched Henry VIII usurp papal authority and take control of the church in England. In 1556, Pole received the sacrament of holy orders and was consecrated as the last Catholic Archbishop of Canterbury under the Catholic Queen Mary I, known as Mary Tudor. She was Henry VIII's daughter and eventually became Queen of England. Henry Pole died the same year as Mary Tudor, and the office of Archbishop of Canterbury was usurped by Protestants from that point forward. Fast forward to July 1975, when a man named Donald Cogan, who held the usurped office of Archbishop of Canterbury, wrote a letter to Pope Paul VI declaring his intention to ordain female priests. He wrote in part, "It is with this in mind that we write now to inform your holiness of the slow but steady growth of a consensus of opinion within the Anglican Communion that there are no fundamental objections in principle to the ordination of women to the priesthood. At the same time, we are aware that action on this matter could be an obstacle to further progress along the path of unity Christ wills for his church. The central authorities of the Anglican Communion have therefore called for common counsel on this matter, as has the General Synod of the Church of England. So despite acknowledging that this was an innovation that was never a practice in the church, Coggan was intent upon doing it regardless. It's the Protestant way. My will be done. Division begets division, and perversion begets perversion. Pope Paul VI responded to Coggan in November of 1975. He wrote in part, "Your Grace is, of course, well aware of the Catholic Church's position on this position. She holds that it is not admissible to ordain women to the priesthood for very fundamental reasons. These reasons include the example recorded in sacred scriptures of Christ choosing his apostles only from among men, the constant practice of the Church, which has imitated Christ in choosing only men, and her living teaching authority, which has consistently held that the exclusion of women from the priesthood is in accordance with God's plan for his church." Thanks to President Donald Trump, executive orders are back in fashion today. The church also issues executive orders. They're called apostolic letters, and they're written by the Pope, who, as the successor of St. Peter and head of the apostles, and the one and only church founded by Jesus, invested with his authority to maintain order within the church. In 1994, Pope St. John Paul II issued an apostolic letter on the ordination of women entitled Ordinatio Sacerdotales. It begins with the following paragraph. Priestly ordination, which hands on the office entrusted by Christ to his apostles of teaching, sanctifying, and governing the faithful, has in the Catholic Church, from the beginning, always been reserved to men alone. This tradition has also been faithfully maintained by the Oriental churches, or our brothers in the East. The letter goes on to underscore the reasons for this teaching as described by his predecessor, Pope John Paul VI. The reason is that in giving the Church her fundamental constitution, her theological anthropology, thereafter always followed by the Church's tradition. Christ established things in this way. And the letter concludes, "Wherefore, in order that all doubt may be removed regarding a matter of great importance, a matter which pertains to the Church's divine constitution itself, in virtue of my ministry of confirming the brethren, I declare that the Church has no authority whatsoever to confer priestly ordination on women, and that this judgment is to be definitively held by all the Church's faithful. Female priests are entirely a man-made anti-Christian innovation introduced into so-called Christian sects by the corrupt ideology of Protestantism, which departed from the history and tradition of the Church to pursue the will of man." The issue has also been repeatedly addressed by Pope Francis, who modern progressivists hoped would come to their rescue and blessed their view of this corrupt practice. But in an interview given in 2022, Pope Francis once again affirmed, "And why can a woman not enter ordained ministry? It is because the Petrine principle has no place for that." He went on, "So there are three principles, two theological and one administrative. The Petrine principle, which is the ministerial dimension, but the Church cannot function only with that one. The Marian principle, which is that of the spousal church, the Church as spouse, the Church as woman. And the administrative principle, which is not theological, but is rather that of administration, about what one does." This issue is not about equality, and it never was. It's about undermining God and his holy church. From the beginning, God made us male and female. Men and women have different roles in life and in society, roles that correspond with our God-given sex, male and female. The people pushing female ordination are the same people that pushed for birth control. They are the same people who advocate for the wholesale slaughter of the unborn in the very wombs of their mother, which Pope Francis rightly equates to hiring a hitman. They are the same people who corrupted the holy sacrament of marriage by claiming that a union between people of the same sex is akin to marriage. And they are the same people who claim that women can be men and men can be women. All they have to do is believe they are one. All these other so-called Christian communions are to varying degrees corrupt. They follow false, man-made innovations founded by man to do the will of man. We see that in the Anglican Communion and its American spin-off, the Episcopalians, in their ordination of women to the priesthood. And we see that personified by this so-called Episcopalian bishop who advocates evil ideologies like homosexuality and transgenderism from the pulpit while claiming to represent Christ. These people are not seeking equality. They are seeking to undermine the will of God, and worse yet, they're doing it in His holy name. As Pope Francis reminds us, Jesus respected and valued women and relied on them for many things, as the Church continues to do to this day. But He did not rely upon them to do men's work. The ministerial priesthood is the work of men. That doesn't diminish the role of women. It only makes it different, just like men and women are different. Neither a nun nor a priest nor the Pope himself holds the highest honor in the Church. That role is reserved for the saints, and Mary, the Mother of God, is chief among them. And we are all called to be saints, men and women alike. Jesus left us a church in order to give us the support we need to become saints. It's the only church founded by Jesus. It's the only church vested with His authority to teach and preach in His name. And it's the only church He promised to protect from false teaching until the end of time through the guidance of the Holy Spirit. As Catholics, we cannot go wrong if we adhere to the teachings of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That's why it's so important for us as Catholics to know our faith. It'll prevent us from being led astray by the wolves in sheep's clothing, doing the work of the enemy and making it more difficult for us to become saints. If you like this video, please take a moment to like it and share it with others. Thanks very much for watching, and as always, Siempre Adelante.